Now, come with us as we go back to 1803. Imagine yourself as a man or a woman living in early Ohio, dressing for a very special occasion. Walking into the main room, our young man places his clothing on a chair so as to dress near the warm hearth. In 1803 Ohio, a young man of ordinary means arises to don a clean shirt of linen, that is, if he owns more than one or two. Since most men wear no other clothing beneath it, the shirt is considered to be his only underwear. Depending on how many shirts he owns, a man might well continue to wear the shirt from the previous day, which he may also have worn to bed. A change into clean linen, however, is one of the main ways a man can reveal his increased economic status. Men's shirts at this time may also be trimmed with ruffles at the neck opening and at the cuffs. The young man folds his white neckcloth, usually made of fine linen. Folding the 36-inch square into a neat length can be a real challenge and takes practice. The neckcloth holds the collar in place and is another indicator of status. The more well-to-do man may change his neckcloth several times a day to be clean. But he wouldn't think of taking a bath, which is still considered to be unhealthy. Stockings, usually knit of cotton or wool, are important as these early citizens walk a great deal. These cotton knit stockings keep his feet warm and dry, and may also help prevent painful blisters. These blisters can easily become infected and could lead to blood poisoning and even to death. Our young gentleman tucks his shirt tails between his legs as he pulls on his linen pantaloons. Linen is lighter weight and generally worn during warmer weather. However, for the poor, it is the fabric used for outer clothing year-round. Our young man may well own at least one pair of wool pantaloons for cooler weather. Some men still wear knee breeches, but the longer pantaloons are becoming popular for informal daily wear. He buttons his pantaloons at the front fall or small fall closing. The fullness in the back allows room for the shirt tails and also permits him to sit, ride, and work. The waistcoat or vest continues the up and down lines of the clothing, reminding people of the statues and architectural columns of classical Greece and Rome. The vest is of wool and comes to just below his natural waist. His footwear may be boots, into which he can tuck the legs of the pantaloons, or for dress, flat-heeled leather shoes that tie. Even the shoe reflects the concept of equality and democracy. After all, almost any man can afford these ties. Thomas Jefferson, as the first president to wear such clothing, further popularizes it. The high collar is also reflected in that of the cutaway tailed coat, which is made of a heavy fulled wool, but could also be made of linen. This coat is cut in the latest fashion with the M-cut notched collar. Green, along with blue and brown, are the popular dark colors for a coat, to contrast with the lighter colored pantaloons. His hat, considered appropriate for a man's best attire, is what we today would call a top hat. This round hat is made of felted beaver fur for the wealthy men, but ordinary folks can afford one in the same style, of felted wool. It's much less expensive, but not nearly as water-resistant. A young man in Ohio, or most anywhere in the United States in 1803, is thus attired in his best clothing. European travelers find themselves confused and frustrated. in their attempt to determine status or social standing of American men and women they may meet. Clothing is a major indicator of social status, but a young man thusly dressed may be a farmer or the town blacksmith dressed for church, or he could be a banker or even the governor. A working woman on the frontier usually has one set of clothes that she saves for her best, and never wears these items when cooking in the hearth or performing other physical work. Today, Mary carries her clothes closer to the bedroom fireplace as she prepares to dress in her best for the day. Her linen shift or chemise is her only underwear. It can be washed with the rest of the family's linen, with lye soap in a kettle of bubbling hot water, then spread out to dry over bushes or in the grass. Thus, white linens or cottons are the only fabrics which can be washed and be truly clean, as they are being continuously bleached by the sun. A woman may have a separate shift for sleeping if she owns enough of them. If not, she may wear the same shift for several days and nights in a row. Stockings are important for all women as well as for the men. Mary's best stockings are knit and embellished with clocking, a decorative pattern, which is either knit into the stocking itself or embroidered. This pair is knit of cotton, but they can also be made of wool or silk. They can also be cut and sewn from fabric, which is not as comfortable to wear. Stockings can be colorful, but most Americans seem to prefer white, as they can be more easily washed and kept clean. Mary ties on garters to hold up her stockings just below the knee. These garters are lengths of tape, which is often woven at home on tape looms by younger children. The herringbone pattern of this wool and linen tape seems to work well for Mary. Her best shoes are what we would call flats, but actually have a small slip heel. Sometimes they are enhanced with ribbon sewn into the fabric of the uppers, crisscrossed and tied at the ankles. Early 19th century women think that flat shoes, especially those with ribbon, look like the sandals worn by the Greeks and Romans. Complementing this columnar or up-and-down look is Mary's corset or stays, which she laces using a bodkin, a needle-like threader with a large eye. Bodkins come in a variety of shapes and sizes, but are all used for the same purpose. These linen stays, patterned on a pair in Danvers, Massachusetts, are boned with caning instead of whalebone, an adaptation easily and cheaply available to many women on the frontier. The stays are half boned in the back and fully boned at the front. A woman with no personal servants can lace her own stays. Mary does this with a continuous lacing style or motion. There are many different types of stays worn at this time period, and Mary is showing us just one example. The purpose of the stays is to give support to the back and to give an up and down or tubular look to the outer clothing. It is not to create a small waist. Ordinary working women do not lace their stays too tightly and find them quite comfortable, especially when performing daily tasks. Mary pins the back neck of the triangular kerchief so that it will lay flat. She tucks it in at the neckline for modesty, and when tucked in, a kerchief could be called a fichu. Also popular are little tuckers or chemisettes, which tie on under the bodice and look like a ruffled blouse. Women, too, may change their kerchiefs frequently in an effort to freshen up. Mary's best dress is patterned after one in the museum at Richmond, Indiana. It's made of printed cotton, not a cheap fabric, but one her family can afford. She will wear this one best dress for several years, or until it wears out, or the style can no longer be updated. At that point, she may use the fabric that's available to make clothing for a smaller person, perhaps a child. Other pieces of cotton or linen can be sold or traded to be used in the making of paper. The little pillow tied inside and at the back of the high waist forces her skirt to hang straight. The cotton bodice is lined in linen, a fabric that is still much cheaper than the cotton. Mary crosses over the linen underbodice and pins it in the front. Notice that there are no buttons on Mary's clothing, just tapes and pins, which also permit wearing and adjustment during pregnancy. The fact that Mary wears a wig is not uncommon for women who can afford them. A short curly hairstyle is popular for both women as well as for men. But many women wish to keep their hair longer to wear it up and curled, perhaps for evening. A wig gives them options without having to cut their hair. Women may or may not wear caps indoors. Many older women still do. But everyone does wear a hat outdoors. This protects the hair from dust and dirt and helps to keep it in place. Louise, in contrast, as an older, more mature woman, wears a cap even indoors over her curls, also affected by the use of a wig. Many older women still prefer the ruffled mob cap, although many other designs are still popular. Hats of many different styles are in high fashion. Mary is fortunate to have two hats. One resembles the jockey style. It's made with a straw brim and can be worn year-round with its crown of silk fabric. She chooses instead a bonnet of silk with a high crown and decorated with artificials or silk flowers. Louise's best dress, like Mary's, is of printed cotton. The style, however, is called an apron front, as the single-paneled skirt front is tied like an apron under the high bodice and at the back. This leaves slits in the sides to reach the old-fashioned pockets, which tie on over her stays. The detachable long sleeves need to be sewn in for daytime wear, but make the dress much more versatile. Short sleeves for evening and long sleeves for daily and best wear. To leave the house, she will simply place a straw hat over her cap and tie it on in the gypsy style. A fine wool shawl can ward off a chill. Mary's reticule, similar to a woman's purse of today, replaces the pockets tied on under the fuller skirts of colonial times. Gloves complete a fashionable costume for both men and women, as well as keep their hands clean. Women, even those on the frontier, are attempting to achieve a fashionable look popular throughout the United States. Mary and Louise have joined Ryan near the hearth as they prepare to depart. In July of 1803, Meriwether Lewis is still in Pittsburgh, overseeing the keelboat construction for the forthcoming Lewis and Clark expedition. The men and women who remain at home, while Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery travel west into the Louisiana Territory, continue their everyday lives. We can well imagine these ordinary men and women wearing clothing such as this as their very best, while they strive for what we know as the American dream.